Let's talk about the Franks. The Franks were a Germanic kingdom who had control over the area known as Gaul, which to us is modern-day France, and they helped bring Christianity to all of Western Europe. So you can see here this early area of Gaul known as France to us, and eventually that's going to become the part of the Carolingian Empire when we see the development of the Holy Roman Empire. Their early capital is going to be in Paris, which makes sense since we're talking about France. And they become the preeminent, basically means number one, military and political power in Western Europe. So they are pretty much calling the shots. They are going to convert from polytheism, with its roots in the Norse religion, like what we saw from the Vikings, to Christianity, as we know that Christianity is going to be Catholic, Catholicism. And they attempted to continue the rule or imperial authority in Western Europe, but they had fallen by the late 9th century. So they attempted to continue imperial authority as an empire, but remember, the Roman Empire in the West fell in 476, and the West is going to continue to decline. And so then the imperial authority of the Franks is going to decline by the late 9th century, which is the late 800s. And so looking at that rise and decline of the Franks, first we have to talk about King Clovis. Now, he ruled from 481 to 511, and he's going to be the first monarch to unite all the Frankish tribes, and he's the first Roman Catholic, hence the word, look at the word Roman Catholic ruler of the Franks. So just how Constantine was the first Roman emperor to be Christian, specifically Catholic, see the same thing with the Franks, with Clovis becoming the first Roman Catholic ruler. So he converts to Christianity, and he is going to align his kingdom with the Catholic Church. This is so that he can legitimize his rule through religion. And this is something that we're going to see a lot in world history with the Catholic rulers in the absolute monarchies that we're going to talk about in period 2, like King Louis XIV. They rely very heavily on the Catholic Church and enforcement of the Catholic Church in order to cement their rule. And so if he aligns his rule with the Catholic Church, remember the Catholic Church is very, very powerful during this time period, and so that is only going to serve to legitimize and solidify his rule. And so he begins a partnership between the secular rulers and the Catholic Church. Now, whereas he was a strong ruler, unfortunately the government under his heirs, under his sons that take over, is going to be unstable. Okay, so you see a lack of stable government. A historical continuity. This is a big continuity. So much like we saw that Confucianism was the major continuity in China, and Hinduism and the caste system is a huge continuity in India, you're going to see that centralized governments in Europe struggle with succession problems. Succession meaning who's supposed to take over after the king dies. Because in the early Frankish history, you're going to see that the king starts dividing up his kingdom according to how many sons he has. So instead of primogeniture, which says the firstborn gets everything, instead the early Frankish kings are going to say, no, I'm going to carve my empire up into pieces and divide it amongst my heirs. So that's going to lead to decentralized government, which means not very stable. Now, one of his heirs, Charles Martel, is going to be a very strong ruler. He reigns from around or circa 718 until his death in 741. And he also has a really cool name. He was known as Charles the Hammer, a really cool name for a leader. So he was the Frankish military and political leader. He is going to rise to power by expanding the Frankish Empire, expanding their borders, and notably, he is going to be very important in his role in defeating the Muslims from Al-Andalus. Remember that that is Spain, the Islamic Caliphate in Spain. He is going to defeat the Muslims, also known as the Moors, in the Battle of Tours in 732. And this is hugely significant. You need to know this. Why is it significant? Because it stopped further spread of Islam into Europe. Okay, so the Islamic Caliphate, the Umayyad dynasty, was stopped in its tracks in 732 due to the military leadership of Charles Martel. And so he preserves Christianity, Catholicism in particular, as the main religion in Europe. So that's why we're going to see Western Europe is predominantly Catholic because of his victory at the Battle of Tours. He's also going to found a new dynasty meaning leadership that is passed down through a family line. And this dynasty, from the Latin word Carolus, which is Latin for Charles, is going to lead to the Carolingian dynasty, okay, tracing back to Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer. And he is going to divide this empire at his death. He's going to divide it amongst his sons. And so this empire, once again, becomes fairly decentralized from 741 until 751. Well, what happens in 751? His son is going to take over. Pepin the Short is going to declare dominance at this time. And so the Carolingian dynasty continues with his son Pepin in 751. He becomes king of the Franks, and he is going to rule from 752 until 768. Essentially, Pepin got the Pope to declare Pepin's right to the throne. That means religious legitimacy. So remember, that's another continuity where secular leaders align themselves with the church in order to legitimize their rule. And so we see the establishment of the Carolingian dynasty. Charles Martel's grandson, Charlemagne, which is just another word for Charles the Great, Charlemagne is going to become one of the greatest kings in Western European history. So Charlemagne is going to rule from 768 to 814, so a very, very long rule. This rule is going to be characterized by him establishing peace and encouraging church-based education. So you have a period of peace and church-based education. Okay, so remember, he is legitimizing his ties to the Catholic Church in order to legitimize his own power. He's going to expand the Frankish borders to control much of the continent. And so for the first time since the fall of Rome in 476 CE, we see the united empire once again under a centralized ruler. And so he's also going to be credited as the founder of the French and German monarchies that establish after the Holy Roman Empire falls apart again. So he is barely literate, but he is intelligent and charismatic, and it's through that personality, it's through that clout that he is able to establish his empire. So here we see a reference to the German Empire that's going to emerge, and then here we have the Valois, the French Empire, that's going to trace its heritage all the way back to Charles the Great. And so he's going to help spread Christianity. Remember, he legitimizes his rule through the church throughout the kingdom. He's going to use a similar system as the Persians in terms of breaking down the empire into smaller parts and electing a satrap to be in charge, or a governor. So he's going to have governors that he elects to put in charge of provinces to help him rule those provinces and report back to him. So he basically breaks the empire up into smaller pieces so it's more manageable. And he's also going to send envoys, okay, and this is his system, Missi Dominici, which is where he would send envoys, or people on his payroll, to travel throughout the kingdom and to review the accounts and records of local authorities. So even though he would put a governor in charge of a province, he would also send spies, basically. He would send his envoys to go and check to make sure that they were collecting taxes appropriately and that they were enforcing his laws and that they weren't trying to stage a revolt against him and form their own empire or form their own kingdom by breaking off from his empire. And so in order to maintain control over this large expanse of territory, he regularly visited the various areas of his empire. All right, and during these visits, he is going to help the Pope conquer an area known as Lombardy in Italy. And as payment, or as a thank you for the help that Charlemagne gave him, the Pope is going to declare Charlemagne the Holy Roman Emperor. This is going to be on Christmas Day in year 800. Basically, the Pope is saying that we haven't had a Roman emperor since the fall of Rome in 476, but Charlemagne, he looks good for it, so he is going to be the next Roman emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, the Byzantine Empire at this time is going to be pretty salty, because the Byzantine Empire says, wait, we're the Roman Empire. We're the continuation of the ancient Roman Empire. Y'all are still in your dark ages, right? But the Pope says, nope, because the Byzantine Empire wasn't following the Pope's rules. They had their own little patriarch. They were iconoclastic. And so the Pope's going to say, yeah, no, off with you, the Byzantine Empire. This is the real Roman Empire, the Roman Empire under Charlemagne. So the Byzantine Empire is salty, but they can't really do anything about it. And so this Holy Roman Empire that is established in the year 800 on Christmas Day is a multi-ethnic, meaning bunches of different people, multi-ethnic complex of territories. Okay, so basically city-states with very different peoples, mostly comprising what we would consider modern Germany. Although modern Germany isn't going to be a thing until 1871, so we've still got quite a while, whole 1,000 years, before we see Germany as we know it today. After Charlemagne's rule, no one's really going to be able to fill those shoes of being the Holy Roman Emperor, so no one else is really established as the Holy Roman Empire until later, a German king known as Otto I in 962 is going to declare himself a Holy Roman Emperor. So then you see again the status of the Holy Roman Emperor is repeated, and that's going to be passed down through his dynasty, through his heritage. And so his establishment as the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire is going to foreshadow Otto I's rule in 962. Here we see that Charlemagne regularly visited every part of his empire. That's how he was able to maintain control over such a large expanse of territory. Also, you see these tributary states through the Serbs, the Croats, and the Slavs that pay him tribute as ruler, much like we saw in the Tang Dynasty in China. After helping the Pope conquer Lombardy, he is going to be crowned the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, but he is going to be limited by feudalism. Feudalism was where you have those local rulers who can give out land and create vassals and raise their own armies, and so these nobles are always vying for control. They're always vying for power, like the dukes and the counts. They're always going to be vying for power with Charlemagne, and so he wants to cut their power out. He tried to lessen the power of the nobles by undermining feudalism, but ultimately he is going to fail because feudalism is going to be a huge continuity in Western Europe. He's also going to increase the value of education, so an attempt to take them out of the Dark Ages and out of the low Middle Ages and into the high Middle Ages. That's not going to be very successful. But his rule is historically significant because it helps to define the culture of the Middle Ages, meaning that it is very, very Catholic and it is very, very feudalistic. Okay, so decentralized government, and the Pope in Rome basically calls the shots, even though the Pope did do Charlemagne a solid by declaring him the Holy Roman Emperor. You still have the seat of Rome, with the Pope being the center of power during this time. Now, after Charlemagne's death, he is going to divide his empire amongst his son. So he gives it to his son, Louis the Pious, but his son is going to be a very, very weak ruler. During this time period, the Holy Roman Empire goes through a period of internal disunity and external invasions. So they not only have to deal with what's going on internally with people vying for power, but they also have invaders coming in with the Moors and the Vikings and the Magyars coming in and trying to take over their empire. After Louis the Pious died, he had 3 sons, and that eventually is going to lead to conflict since the empire becomes divided up amongst those sons. Rather than just give it to one son, the eldest son, and let him inherit everything, instead they make it so that it's divided amongst them all. And so this is going to lead to conflict, it's going to lead to civil war that eventually ends with the Treaty of Verdun. And so once again, we see decentralization, decentralized government. Central authority starts to lose its power, and that is only going to increase the power of the feudal lords. So their power and authority increases because that just means local rule increases. When there isn't one king or one emperor to report to, and instead you start getting split into different areas, different kingdoms, that means that the local rulers become more important than a king or an emperor that you'll never see. Remember, Charlemagne regularly visited every part of his kingdom, not so much with his weaker successors, with his weaker heirs. And so instead, people are going to pledge fealty or loyalty to their local noble or their duke or whoever's manor they happen to be living on at that time and working for. So here we see the division of the empire between the three grandsons after the Treaty of Verdun with Charles the Bald and Louis the German. And then this area in the middle is going to be very suspect because you're going to have two empires, two kingdoms, wanting to take over land and territory there. So they're basically smushed into the middle, and they're going to slowly but surely lose their land and their territory through that conflict, as we're going to see in this video in Schoology that I would highly recommend you watch.